All right, good evening, folks. Welcome to Monday Night Law here in Kirk's Law Corner. Hope everybody's doing great. It's, what is this, Monday, the August 12th, 2024. Hope everybody's doing okay out there. Weather permitting, storms permitting. So we're going to continue on from last week from Montesquieu. Hi, Diesel D's. Good to see you, brother. Good question out here about Montesquieu. Who is this guy? Seems like I'm so excited about him. Well, Montesquieu was a judge, philosopher, something else in the beginning of the book there. I don't know, which volume do I got here? That's volume 2. He's very, very well studied. And I want to remind people that Montesquieu wrote this long before our Confederate Republic was created. He actually died, I think it was 1755. I don't know if it's in here. Yeah, it doesn't say here. I might. Yeah, there's some stuff, a memoir here. But the PDF I got has a short dissertation on it, but yeah. And this book's here. You know, in one of the parts there, he talks about how he's, you know, not necessarily just his own thoughts and opinions, but from facts, from history that he has studied. So this is a great two volume set information history of law to read from. A great source, you know, points of authority. So when we read from this book, these books, this is a very high authority on law and history of law because of who it's written by and the contents that are in it. Yep, 1689 to 1755. I haven't narrowed it down to when he actually wrote these particular books, but originally written in French, translated into English. So for those of you that were over on the Thursday night call, National Assembly call, you got a slimmed down, shortened version. What I'm going on here is all of it, every last little bit of it, so that we're not missing anything. And in this particular area that we're reading from, as in form of government, this was at the time, and there's not really been any new forms of government. Although there's a lot of word salad words out there like communism, socialism, fascism. Those are isms. That's an economy. That's not form of government. So, again, for those on Thursday night call, and even from last Monday night, no such thing as a constitutional republic as a form of government. Doesn't exist. So the thing is, I personally used to call it that we were a constitutional republic because I didn't know no better. Seems legitimate. It really does, because there's a constitution. But when you start studying fundamental law, like Blackstone's commentaries on the law of England, there's another great source that even the Supreme Court of the United States of America is citing as points of authority on the history of law. Actual text, as it is written. So, again, these things that I read from, these books that I read from, are excellent sources to cite from in a court case or in a petition to the legislature. Those are all legitimate sources of law. And I want to remind people again that the Supreme Court has changed their essentially standard of review to actual text and history, not judicial opinions or whatever a statute would say. But see, again, this is law. Oh, hi, Dolores. Good to see you out there on Facebook. So, yeah, these things, reading means reading. And if the Supreme Court's citing from it, that's got to be something good to read from. Now, the thing is what we're reading here is about the history of forms of government, or like what the title of the book says, Spirit of Laws. In the Spirit. So, without further ado, let's kick this off over here to Montesquieu. This one, yeah. We had left off right here, section 3. And I think this was under the nature of government. Let's go back up and look at the heading here. I have my notes here. Wow, it's pretty lengthy. All right, come on now. Yeah, okay, so this is the beginning of Book 2 of Laws directly derived from the nature of government. See, and we had covered of the Republican government and the laws in relation to democracy. See, we're not a democracy. We're definitely not a monarchy. We're a despotic government is more or less what we have now. We're back under that frickin' absolute despotism. About that nature and the spirit. What is this form of government like? Again, I wanted to point out that Constitution Republic doesn't exist. It's either has a democracy or an aristocracy or a confederacy. Let's get back down here to section 3. Come on. There we go. So, of the laws in relation to the nature of aristocracy. In an aristocracy, the supreme power is lodged in the hands of a certain number of persons. These are invested both with the legislative and executive authority, and the rest of the people are, in respect to them, the same as the subjects of a monarchy in regard to the sovereign. So, right off the bat, we know that we're not an aristocracy because all political power is inherent in the people, and we're not subjects of the legislative and executive authority. We did not grant that power. They do not vote here by lot, for this would be productive of inconveniences only. I swear we've already read this. Maybe I did. I know that I read this already. And indeed, in a government where the most mortifying distinctions are already established, though they were to be chosen by lot, still they would not cease to be odious. It is a nobleman that they envy, and not the magistrate. I swear we've already read this. Maybe this was Thursday night, because I talked about odious as in Joseph Story in his commentaries on the Constitution used the word odious. Skanky claims. Oh yeah, okay, so it was Wednesday night workshop. It is the noblemen they envy, and not the magistrate. When the nobility are numerous, there must be a senate to regulate the affairs which the body of the nobles are incapable of deciding, and to prepare others for their decision. In this case, it may be said that the aristocracy is in some measure in the Senate, the democracy in the body of the nobles, and the people are a cipher. So, that doesn't fit our Confederate Republic now, does it? We don't have them titles of nobilities, them nobles. It would be a very happy thing in an aristocracy if the people, in some measure, could be raised from their state of annihilation. Thus, at Genoa, the Bank of St. George being administered by the people gives them a certain influence in the government, whence their whole prosperity is derived. The senators ought by no means to have the right of naming their own members, for this would be the only way to perpetuate abuses. At Rome, which in its early years was a kind of aristocracy, the Senate did not fill up the vacant seats in their own body. The new members were nominated by the censors. In a republic, the sudden rise of a private citizen to exorbitant power produces monarchy, or something more than a monarchy. In the latter, the laws have provided for, or in some measure adapted themselves to, the Constitution. And the principle of government checks the monarch. But in a republic, where a private citizen has obtained an exorbitant power, the abuse of this power is much greater, because the laws foresaw it not, and consequently made no provision against it. Now, we did in our form of government, right? We have the impeachment process to remove the president, to remove the governor from duty. We have due process of law. There are things put in place to remove public servants for usurpations of power, maladministration, malfeasance. There is an exception to this rule when the Constitution is such as to have immediate need of a magistrate invested with extraordinary power. Such was Rome with her dictators, such as Venice with her state inquisitors. These are formidable magistrates who restore, as it were by violence, the state to its liberty. Well, I guess this is where we, the people, do that. But how comes it that these magistracies are so very different in these two republics? It is because Rome supported the remains of her aristocracy against the people. Whereas Venice employs her state inquisitors to maintain her aristocracy against the nobles. So that's the two different things that they did there with their magistrates. To get rid of somebody here, I think. James, peach trees ain't much good for hanging unless it's laundry. Get rid of somebody here, I think. James, peach trees. All right. The consequence was that at Rome the dictatorship could be only of short duration, as the people acted through passion and not with design. It was necessary that a magistracy of this kind should be exercised with luster and pomp, the business being to intimidate and not to punish the multitude. It was also proper that the dictator should be created only for some particular affair, and for this only should have an unlimited authority, as he was always created upon some sudden emergency. On the contrary, at Venice, they have occasion for a permanent magistracy. For here it is that schemes may be set on foot, continued, suspended, and resumed, that the ambition of a single person becomes that of a family, and the ambition of one family that of many. They have occasion for a secret magistry. The crimes they punish being hatched in secrecy and silence. That be that corruption stuff. This magistracy must have a general inquisition, for their business is not to remedy known disorders, but to prevent the unknown. Well, that's weird. In a word, latter is designed to punish suspected crimes, right? Well, we think that you might commit a crime, whereas the former used rather menaces than punish, even for crimes that were openly avowed. So it kind of allowed things to happen. In all magistracies, the greatest of the power must be compensated by the brevity of the duration. This most legislators have fixed to a year. A longer space would be dangerous, and a shorter would be contrary to the nature of government. For who is it that in the management even of his domestic affairs would be thus confined? At Regisua, the chief magistrate of the republic is changed every month. The other officers every week, and the governor of the castle every day. But this can take place only in a small republic environed by formidable powers who might easily corrupt such petty and insignificant magistrates. Can you imagine trying to change the governor every day? Holy smokes. But see, what they're actually really talking about here is what the grand jury does. This is about the grand jury. Grand jury does the investigations, huh? Yeah. The best aristocracy is that in which those who have no share in the legislature are so few and inconsiderable that the governing party have no interest in oppressing them. Thus, when Antipater made a law at Athens that whosoever was not worth 2,000 drachms should have no power to vote, he formed by this method the best aristocracy possible, because this was so small a sum as to exclude very few, and not one of any rank or consideration in the city. So that would be one of those positive things, right? That you only had to have a certain amount of wealth, and you could qualify to vote. Aristocratic families ought, therefore, as much as possible, to level themselves in appearance with the people. The more an aristocracy borders on democracy, the nearer it approaches perfection, and in proportion as it draws towards monarchy, the more it is imperfect. But the most imperfect of all is that in which the part of the people that obeys is in a state of civil servitude to those who command, as the aristocracy of Poland, where the peasants are slaves to the nobility. So, think about this from the time period here and everything that we had gone through, historically speaking. It's no wonder they wanted a Confederate Republic. And see, and the thing is when we look at our Constitution and Bills of Rights, who has the power? The people do. So these are part of the, in the spirit of the form of government, which dictates the actual form of government. Not by sheer will of the people saying, well, we're a democracy. That doesn't work like that. We have to look at the certain principles, facts of who does what, who has what powers, who are the sovereign, who's endowed with sovereignty. Because those particular things dictates what the form of government is. And so, as we're reading through here, we can clearly see what we're not. And what we're supposed to be. All right, section 4 of the relation of laws to the nature of monarchical government. The intermediate, subordinate, and dependent powers constitute the nature of monarchical government. I mean of that in which a single person governs by fundamental laws. Now, this is one of those things where we look at our republic, Confederate Republic here, is we do have a fundamental law. But that is so that we don't need the legislature to make law. See, when you have a fundamental law, we don't need the legislature to make law, as we will see right here, even under a monarchy. Okay? I said the intermediate, subordinate, and dependent powers. And, indeed, in monarchies, the prince is the source of all power, political and civil. These fundamental laws necessarily suppose the intermediate channels through which the power flows. For if there be only the momentary and capricious will of a single person to govern the state, nothing can be fixed, and of course, there is no fundamental law. Okay. So understanding this, the setup of a monarchy, remember you have the king and you have the parliament, and then the prince is over the state. Right? That's that one man who governs over the state. But they're supposed to have these fundamental laws. So this is where we look at, Roman civil law, the code, as a fundamental law, a body of law, a jurisdiction, as opposed to feudal law, a separate body of law as a fundamental law, as opposed to common law as a separate fundamental law, a separate body of law. As Blackstone lays out in his commentaries, those are the three parts or fundamental laws, jurisdictions. Okay? So, knowing this, we know what we're looking at as a fundamental law. The The most natural, intermediate, and subordinate power is that of the nobility. This, in some measure, seems to be essential to a monarchy, whose fundamental maxim is no monarch, no nobility. No nobility, no monarch. But there may be a despotic prince. So, think about this for a second. We had put in our Constitution there, Article 1, Section 9, Clause 8, no titles of nobility. So if there's no nobility, there's no monarch. But we could still have a despotic prince or despotic person governing the state, nation state. There are men who have endeavored in some countries in Europe to suppress the jurisdiction of the nobility. Now remember, keep in mind here, this was written long before our republic. So you can see just this little tiny piece of the puzzle here of that there are men that have, basically said, we're tired of this nobility crap. Not perceiving that they were driving at the very thing that was done by the Parliament of England. Abolish the privileges of the lords, the clergy, and cities in a monarchy, and you will soon have a popular state, or else a despotic government. The courts of a considerable kingdom in Europe have, for many ages, been striking at the patrimonial jurisdiction of the lords and clergy. That's where we start getting into that ecclesiastical crap. We do not pretend to censure these sage magistrates, but we leave it to the public to judge how far this may alter the Constitution. So, it's like, how can it alter the Constitution? Well, in this form of government, it sure possibly can. Far am I from being prejudiced in favor of the privileges of the clergy. However, I should be glad if their jurisdiction were once fixed. The question is not whether their jurisdiction was justly established, but whether it be really established. Whether it constitutes a part of the laws of the country and is in every respect in relation to those laws. Whether between two powers acknowledged independent, the conditions ought not to be reciprocal, and whether it be not equally the duty of a good subject to defend the prerogative of the prince and to maintain the limits which from time immemorial have been prescribed to his authority. So it's kind of like there's a little bit of a conflict going on here, and you got to choose the hierarchy. Which one has the more legitimacy? And it seems that under the lords and clergy over there wasn't fixed. Also, was it really established? At all. I think it was more assumed. Though the ecclesiastic power, see, told you, this is ecclesiastical, what they're talking about here, be so dangerous in a republic, yet it is extremely proper in a monarchy, especially of the absolute kind. What would become of Spain and Portugal since the subversion of their laws, were it not for this only barrier against the incursions of arbitrary power? A barrier ever useful when there is no other. But see, they were using it against the people instead of against the public servants. Like against the prince. Against the king. That's where it turns. terms despotic. For since a despotic government is productive of the most dreadful calamities to human nature, the very evil that restrains it is beneficial to the subject. In the same manner as the ocean, threatening to overflow the whole earth, is stopped by weeds and pebbles that lie scattered along the shore, so monarchs, whose power seems unbounded, are restrained by the smallest obstacles and suffer their natural pride to be subdued by supplication and prayer. The English, to favor their liberty, have abolished all the intermediate powers of which their monarchy was composed. They have a great deal of reason to be jealous of this liberty. Were they ever to be so unhappy as to lose it, they would be one of the most servile nations upon earth. Mr. Law, through ignorance, both of a republican and monarchical constitution, was one of the greatest promoters of absolute power ever known in Europe. Funny, his name is Mr. Law. Besides the violent and extraordinary changes owing to his direction, he would fain suppress all the intermediate ranks and abolish the political communities. He was dissolving the monarchy by his chimerical reimbursements, and seemed as if he even wanted to redeem the Constitution. It is not enough to have intermediate powers in a monarchy. There must also be a depository of the laws. This depository can only be the judges of the Supreme Courts of Justice, who promulgate the new laws and revive the obsolete. Okay, so this is talking about in the judicial branch, right? But in our form of government, the judicial branch doesn't have the power to make law. See, this is where I talk about when people try to tell me that, well, common law is stare decisis, case law. Yes, in a monarchy. We're not a monarchy here. That's not common law. Sorry. That depository is that their books. You know, the records. The natural ignorance of the nobility, their indolence and contempt of civil government, require that there should be a body invested with the power of reviving and executing the laws, which would be otherwise buried in oblivion. Notice again, it's executing the laws. Executive branch is to execute the law, not make it. The Prince's Council are not a proper depository. They are naturally the depository of the momentary will of the Prince, and not of the fundamental laws. Besides, the Prince's Council is continually changing. It is neither permanent nor numerous. Neither has it a sufficient share of the confidence of the people. Consequently, it is incapable of setting them right in difficult conjunctures, or of reducing them to proper obedience. You just kind of get away with. Despotic governments, where there are no fundamental laws, have no such kind of depository. Hence it is that religion has generally so much influence in these countries, because it forms a kind of permanent depository. And if this cannot be said of religion, it may of these customs that are respected instead of laws. So, what is it that is our fundamental law, and where is it deposited? Well, that's the thing about the common law. It's actually never, as they say, never formally reduced to writing. It's lex non scripta, the unwritten law. It's supposed to be self-evident, common sense law, because it's based on maxims of law, principles of law, like what I cannot do in my person, I cannot do through the agency of another. But our right to contract is unlimited, right? With the exception to that rule is fraud. So, I ask, can a man lawfully contract with another man to commit murder? Well, the fundamental law says thou shalt not commit murder. So the answer is no. No two men can contract with one another to commit murder because it's unlawful fundamentally and principally. So that's the key to understanding fundamental law. There's principles, okay, and maxims of law. That's the rule of law. It rules over the law. It's a principle of law. Like another one, what a man does in his defense is to be considered legal. That's because the laws of nature dictates that we have the right to defend our life, our liberty, our property, with arms, up to and including, but see, it's not murder. It's killing a man to stop him from his usurpation, his trespass. And it doesn't matter what disguise they're wearing. Oh, we forgot the last part. And if this cannot be said of religion, it may of the customs that are respected instead of laws. So that's the other part of the common law, is customs. So you have maxims of law and customs. How about marriage? Isn't marriage a custom? It's a perfect example of a custom. Marriage is defined by God. So this is a religious act. Marriage is a sacred vow between a man and a woman unto God till death do them part. For those of you out there that got married or are married, whatever, check your marriage license. Remember, license is seeking permission to do a thing that otherwise would be illegal. Well, if it's lawful to get married pursuant to God's law and our custom, how's there a marriage license? That's a contract with the state. The state becomes a party to that contract. And that is how people get subjected to the so-called statutes, code, and rules of procedure, because that right there is the terms and conditions of the contract. It's all contract law, folks. For corporations that have incorporated, that license incorporates that so-called man and woman, incorporated into the state under that license. So, that's the sad part about all this. But back to these maxims of law. Think about that for a minute. Don't those sound like something that would be common sense? Like what a man does in his defense is to be considered legal? To know a thing and to be bound to know it or regarded in law as equivalent? Ignorance of the law is no excuse. This is all supposed to be common sense. Doesn't take a rocket scientist to comprehend these things. It's like one of my go-tos is, do you have to hit your thumb with a hammer to know that it's going to hurt? It's one of my tests for people. Do they possess some common sense here? Can they use logic and reason? All right, number 5. Of the laws in relation to the nature of a despotic government. From the nature of despotic power, it follows that the single person invested with this power commits the execution of it also to a single person. A man who senses continually inform that he himself is everything and that his subjects are nothing is naturally lazy, voluptuous, and ignorant. In consequence of this, he neglects the management of public affairs. But were he to commit the administration to many, there would be continual disputes among them. Each would form intrigues to be his first slave, and he would be obliged to take the reins in his own hands. It is therefore more natural for him to resign it to a vizier, and to invest him with the same power as himself. The creation of a vizier is a fundamental law of this government. Again, we're talking about despotic government. It is related of a pope. Oh, here we go. Back to that Catholicism. Back to the ecclesiastical. Hey, Brother Rob, good to see you on here. That he had started an infinite number of difficulties against his election from a thorough conviction of his incapacity. At length he was prevailed on to accept of the pontificate and resigned the administration entirely to his nephew. He was soon struck with surprise and said, I should never have thought that these things were so easy. The same may be said of the princes of the East, who being educated in a prison where eunuchs corrupt their hearts and debase their understandings, and where they are frequently kept ignorant, even of their high rank, when drawn forth in order to be placed on the throne, are at first confounded. But as soon as they have chosen a vizier, and abandon themselves in their seraglio, to the most brutal passions, pursuing in the midst of a prostituted court every capricious extravagance, they would never have dreamed that they could find matters so easy. The more extensive the empire, the larger the seraglio. Wonder what that one is. You know what? Let's listen to this. Let's go look this up. Let's pull that over here. Where is that word? That one. What is that one? Reference to Muslim lands, the part of the dwelling where the women are secluded. Kind of like a jail. Also the name of former palace of the Sultan in Istanbul, which contained his harem. Palace court. This is from the Iranian base to protect. Enclosure, cage. Yeah, like a jail. Inmates of a harem. Okay. And consequently, the more voluptuous the prince. Hence, the more nations such a sovereign has to rule, the less he attends to the cares of government. The more important his affairs, the less he makes them the subject of his deliberations. Okay, so those are basically, that's that spirit of government. Now we're going to move into the principles of the three kinds of government. So now we're going to get into principles. Okay, the former was in the spirit of. Now we're going to get into principles. And this is the difference between the nature and principle of government. So he's even going to explain what the difference is. Having examined the laws in relation to the nature of each government, we must investigate those which relate to its principle. There is this difference between the nature and principle of government, that the former is that by which it is constituted, the latter that by which it is made to act. One is its particular structure, and the other the human passions which set it in motion. Now, laws ought no less to relate to the principle than to the nature of each government. We must therefore inquire into this principle, which shall be the subject of this third book. Wow, was I way off, huh, Rita? Seraglio. I guess that's how you pronounce that word, Seraglio. And I don't even know if I'm getting that one right, but it's probably much closer than what I had previously pronounced. Like I said last Monday, please forgive me as I may butcher some of these words. So I thank you, Rita, over there. Right? Who would have thought Seraglio? Actually, I can see it. Seragl, Leo. So, yeah, it's just these are it's actually coming from a different language. Remember, even what we just looked up there in etymology is Italian and French. Imagine that. Now, if I can remember that, which I may or may not. Okay, section 2. Of the principle of different governments. I've already observed that it is the nature of a republican government that either the collective body of the people or particular families should be possessed of the supreme power. Of a monarchy, that the prince should have this power, but in the execution of it should be directed by established laws. Of a despotic government, that a single person should rule according to his own will and caprice. So there's your, broke down into about as short as you can break it down in the spirit of a government, of the three types of government, of a republic, a monarchy, and a despotic government. This enables me to discover their three principles, which are thence naturally derived. I shall begin with the republican government, and in particular with that of democracy. Now, again, what kind of republic do we have? Of the principle of democracy, there is no great share of probity necessary to support a monarchical or despotic government. The force of laws in one and the prince's arm in the other are sufficient to direct and maintain the whole. But in a popular state, one spring more is necessary, namely virtue. Now, this is what was missing from Thursday night call. Virtue. Moral turpitude. Principles. What I have here advanced is confirmed. Oh, this is it. This is where he talks about that. What I was referring to in the beginning, that, this isn't his own just opinions. What I have here advanced is confirmed by the unanimous testimony of historians, and is extremely agreeable to the nature of things. For it is clear that in a monarchy, where he who commands the execution of the laws generally thinks himself above them. Huh? Wait a minute. There is less need of virtue than in a popular government, where the person entrusted with the execution of the laws is sensible of his being subject to their direction. But see, that's, look at that right there. For it's clear that a monarchy where he who commands the execution of the laws generally thinks himself above them. How often are we out here talking now of this double standard? Some will say it's a two-tier system. It's a double standard. A law for thee, not for me. They think that they are above the law. They think we are the subjects, the slaves, the peons, the peasants. Now think about that. That's what's being said right here. And notice again, it uses the word execution of the laws, not law enforcement. It's law execution, and it's execution of the law, not the code. Well, if the code is the fundamental law, it is a law. It is a body of law. That is factual. But does it belong in our republic, our Confederate republic? Was it intended to be the fundamental law of our Confederate republic? The answer is no. Because why would they have done the Code of Civil Procedure Act in 1873 in by Congress, and in 1881 here in Idaho, in Section 3 of it specifically, it makes it very clear that the rule of the common law, the statutes and derogation thereof, must be strictly construed, does not apply here. And the code is the law. Again, this is where we have to comprehend a fundamental law, a body of law being fundamental, has a direct effect on the government. Well, comment out here on YouTube, we've traded our rights for privileges. That's the scam. I wouldn't say that we traded. I would say it was an usurpation of power. I would say it was maladministration. I would say it was treason. I would even go so far to say as it was dereliction of duty to throw off such despotism. The people having all political power, having the right to keep and bear arms, which shall not be infringed, for this reason, to throw off such despotism, which we have not only the right, but the duty to do. Think about that. Remember when Trump, at his inauguration speech, said that he was putting the power back into the people's hands? I asked this many times. What power do you think he was referring to? Aside from all political power being inherent in the people, it's all of it. All of the power, right? We're supposed to claim and exercise that power, folks. But we can't exercise that power unless we have the people properly assembled. There's no way to get there without it. We have to reassemble. All right. Clear is it also that a monarch who, through bad advice or indolence, ceases to enforce the execution of the laws, may easily repair the evil. He has only to follow other advice or to shake off this indolence. But when in a popular government there is a suspicion of the laws, as this can proceed only from the corruption of the republic, the state is certainly undone. It's a wonder why everything is in shambles, is because everybody's ignorant. You know, again, it's that the power belongs to the people. I know it's fraud. I know it's usurpation of power. And I'm talking to Sinful Toaster out here on YouTube. How can that happen without due process? Okay. We're reading about the corruption. We're reading about those who are, charged with the duty of execution of the law who don't. But we have to know this stuff, right? We have to know the truth first, the facts of law, and how things are supposed to be, so that we know what is unlawful. We have to know the law first in order to declare it unlawful. Does that make sense? Because, they've dumbed us down in school so bad that nobody alive today was taught anything legitimate in school. I mean, even my grandmother, 92 years old. Nope. Didn't teach him much about our rights, government, functions of government. Diesel D's out here, Brother Diesel, he found something over there on Twitter X. Very, very interesting. Man, I don't know what the time period was on that, but it was education curriculum. One little screenshot of a page, and holy smokes. I highly doubt most any of us could answer those particular questions that were supposed to be taught or were being taught at one point in time. All right, let's see. Oh, I think we went. Yeah, there we go. But when in a popular government, there's suspicion of the laws, and this can proceed only from the corruption of the republic. The state is certainly undone. A very droll spectacle it was in the last century to behold the impotent efforts of the English towards the establishment of democracy, as they who had a share in the direction of public affairs were void of virtue. Uh-oh. So, don't you think we ought to have a virtuous society? A moral society? Are they? I mean, this is part of what's going on right now. All this, the pride stuff, the LGBTQ stuff, the Olympic stuff. They're trying to put it in everybody's face to go, wake up. I mean, this is back to Sodom and Gomorrah again. Plain and simple. This is sexual immorality. This is pure delusion. How much longer are we going to stand or sit and let this continue? As their ambition was inflamed by the success of the most daring of their members, as the prevailing parties were successively animated by the spirit of faction. The government was continually changing. The people, amazed at so many revolutions, in vain attempted to erect a commonwealth. At length, when the country had undergone the most violent shocks, they were obliged to have recourse to the very government which they had so wantonly prescribed. When Sila thought of restoring Rome to her liberty, this unhappy city was incapable of receiving that blessing. She had only the feeble remains of virtue, which were continually diminishing. Instead of being roused from her lethargy by Caesar, Tiberius, Caius, Claudius, Nero, and Domitian, she riveted every day her chains. If she struck some blows, her aim was at the tyrant, not at the tyranny. The politic Greeks who lived under a popular government knew no other support than virtue. The modern inhabitants of that country are entirely taken up with manufacture, commerce, finances, opulence, and luxury. When virtue is banished, ambition invades the minds of those who are disposed to receive it, and avarice possesses the whole community. The objects of their desires are changed. What they were fond of before has become indifferent. They were free while under the restraint of laws, but they would fain now be free to act against law. And as each citizen is like a slave who has run away from his master, that which was a maxim of equity he calls rigor. That which was a rule of action he styles constraint. And to precaution he gives the name of fear. Frugality, and not the thirst of gain, now passes for avarice. Formerly, the wealth of individuals constituted the public treasure, but now this has become the patrimony of private persons. The members of the Commonwealth riot on the public spoils, and its strength is only the power of a few and the license of many. So this is when you get away from virtue. Now remember, we're talking about principles of the form of government. So, are we supposed to have a virtuous society? Is virtue part of our form of government? I know, right? First, Kim out on Facebook, interested in reading this book yourself. This is an awesome book. It is an awesome book. Number 2, Karen out here on YouTube. When you look around today at how young people think and speak, restoring virtue seems close to impossible. I agree. It's pretty scary out there. And we're going to have to do something about it. Seriously. And very, 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 very soon. We really need to get off our butts and get reassembled and take back our power. I mean, basically, we're out on the wide open ocean here, and there's no captain piloting the ship. Nobody's at the helm. Why not? Sinful Toaster, we ain't going back to Leave It to Beaver days, Ward. Why not? What's wrong with that? A moral and just society where we follow God's laws when it comes to our family. Do we have virtue? virtue starts in the home. Get back to a traditional family where the man works and provides for the family, where the wife takes care of the home, takes care of the children. And we get schooling, if we're going to have public schooling, get it back to a virtuous curriculum. And more specifically, just the basics. Mathematics, English language, I think that's where we need to get back to. Well, sinful toaster, that's exactly it. Happy wife, happy life. If you're providing for your wife and she's happy, then you're going to have a happy life. Logic and reason there, dude. I mean, that's how God intended us to live. Well, that's the problem. Education. Need to be reading the Bible. Need to be learning about virtue, what it means to be virtuous, how God intended us to live. I don't think God intended women to be out there in the job market. I just cannot believe that. Well, it is what it is. That's what virtue means. Being virtuous, of moral turpitude, of sound mind, not insane. One of the first primitive laws of nature, actually the first primitive, when man is properly organized, he knows the difference between moral good and moral evil. That's virtue, moral principles. So we need to get back to that. We need to be teaching that to our children at a very young age, when their minds are very impressionable, instead of this gender crap that, oh, well, you can choose your gender, and you can be as crazy messed up in the head all as much as you want. I mean, there's some of these kids out there these days that just literally hurts my brain to even listen to them, because I try to, use logic and reason, but it doesn't work. Well, but that's what we have to do. We have to re-educate ourselves. We have to break down the indoctrination barriers that has
What's this? Oh, my brother.
He must have forgot. Yeah, there's lots of things like Diesel D's just pointed out over here on Telegram. Feminism was created by the Bolsheviks to destroy the family unit. Again, this all goes back to Rules for Radical by Saul Alinsky. To destroy the family unit. You know, and I'll say this again, I've said it before, is that, you know, the taxation and inflation, okay, got it to the point where they, you know, think about that. Taxation. You can only tax the man who's working. Well, wait a minute. We only have about half of the half of the population that's able to work being taxed. Can you imagine if we could get the women to work? How much more revenue we can make? Think of it from that point of view. Just in that one tiny aspect. Getting the woman out of the home, who's there to take care of the home, to take care of the children, to take care of her husband. Get her out of the home. Get her into work so she can pay taxes. Now, what kind of an effect does that have on the home? Well, the home gets neglected. The children get neglected. The husband gets neglected. Because they're both tired when they get home from work. And a lot of times they'll do split shifts. Sometimes they won't even see each other very much. So how does that work for their relationship? Their bond. The bond with the children. You know, just those things right there. Just those few principles. All right, back over here to Montesquieu. Athens was possessed of the same number of forces when she triumphed so gloriously as when with such infamy she was enslaved. She had 20,000 citizens. When she defended the Greeks against the Persians, when she contended for empire with Sparta and invaded Sicily. She had 20,000 when Demetrius Valerius numbered them as slaves are told by the head in a marketplace. When Philip attempted to lord it over Greece and appeared at the gates of Athens, she had even then lost nothing but time. We may see in Demosthenes how difficult it was to awaken her. She dreaded Philip, not as the enemy of her liberty, but of her pleasures. This famous city, which had withstood so many defeats, and having been so often destroyed, had as often risen out of her ashes, was overthrown at Chaeronea, and at one blow deprived of all hopes of resource. What does it avail her that Philip sends back her prisoners if he does not return her men. It was ever after as easy to triumph over the forces of Athens as it had been difficult to subdue her virtue. How was it possible for Carthage to maintain her ground when Hannibal, upon his being made praetor, endeavored to hinder the magistrates from plundering the republic? Did not they complain of him to the Romans? Wretches, who would fain be citizens without a city, and be beholden for their riches to their very destroyers. Rome soon insisted upon having 300 of their principal citizens as hostages. She obliged them next to surrender their arms and ships, and then she declared war. From the desperate efforts of this defenseless city, one may judge of what she might have performed in her vigor and assisted by virtue. So, it's going to take the people coming together. Remember, the militia is composed of the body of the people themselves. That's the second part of the Second Amendment, is the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. There is no legislative authority to take away the right to keep and bear arms. I could give a rat's ass what any Supreme Court of the United States says. I know what it means as it is written. And the fact is that comes from the laws of nature. If we're going to make the argument, well, there's certain people that shouldn't have arms, if we're so worried about those kinds of people, then they should be executed. You cannot take away that fundamental right of self-defense. That's just logic and reason. Plain and simple. It's an absolute right. Now, with the exception of civil death, being exiled. Right? That's the key. But that is a consent of the jury. And the jury would exile. See, the jury is supposed to do the punishment. Because if there's any kind of a fixed or prescribed punishment, then that's a bill of attainder, bill of pains and penalties. Plain and simple. That's how that works. Thank you, Dolores. Thanks for your comment out there. All right. Of the principle, man, I don't know if I want to start this one. Let's see how long it is. Okay. We can do this one. Of the principle of aristocracy. As virtue is necessary in a popular government, it is requisite also in an aristocracy. True, it is that in the latter, it is not so absolutely requisite. The people, who in respect to the nobility are the same as the subjects with regard to a monarch, are restrained by their laws. They have, therefore, less occasion for virtue than the people in a democracy. But how are the nobility to be restrained? They who are to execute the laws against their colleagues will immediately perceive that they are acting against themselves. Virtue is therefore necessary in this body, from the very nature of the Constitution. An aristocratic government has an inherent vigor unknown to democracy. The nobles form a body who, by their prerogative and for their own particular interests, restrain the people. It is sufficient that there are laws in being to see them executed. But easy as it may be for the body of the nobles to restrain the people, it is difficult to restrain themselves. See, again, it's another one of those, it's a law for the people, but not for them. Another double standard. Well, this is the law and it applies to you, but it doesn't apply to me. Judge Dredd, I am the law. Such is the nature of this Constitution. It seems subject the very same persons to the power of the laws, and at the same time to exempt them. Wow. Again, this is an aristocracy. Clearly, we're not an aristocracy because the Constitution essentially only applies to those who are bound by it. And the same thing with the legitimate statutes. The statutes are only supposed to apply to those who are bound by it. The people are not bound by the Constitution. The people are not bound by the statutes. That sure doesn't fit into this aristocracy now, does it? But remember, an aristocracy can still be a republic. It's an aristocratic republic. So, again, what kind of republic are we? Now, such a body as this can restrain itself only in two ways. Either by a very eminent virtue, which puts the nobility in some measure on a level with the people, and may be the means of forming a great republic, or by an inferior virtue, which puts them at least upon a level with one another, and upon this their preservation depends. Moderation is therefore the very soul of this government. A moderation, founded on virtue, not that which proceeds from indolence and pusillanimity. Good Lord. Big words. That's pretty short. That's pretty easy to get. So clearly, we can see that we're not an aristocracy, one, because we don't have nobilities. And the people, again, all political power is inherent in the people. The people are supposed to have all the power. They're the servants. So they're not on the same level with the people. Well, in a way they are, aren't they? In our Confederate Republic, remember, it's of the people, by the people, for the people. Except, per the law of nations and the way we have it set up in Article 6, Clause 3, once you get elected, become a member of either legislative, executive, judicial, both state or federal, you shall be bound by oath or affirmation to support this Constitution. You become a citizen, who is a member of a civil society who is bound to perform certain duties and is subject to its authority. Its authority is the people. So we're supposed to be, not the FBI, not the CIA, not the DOJ, not the governor, not the president, not the sheriff, not the police. It's supposed to be the people, peaceably assembling, consulting for our common good, assembling grand juries and doing grand jury indictments, bill of indictments. That's right. We're supposed to be doing that. of the people, by the people. So unless we have the people, there is no of the people. How are the people going to do anything when the people aren't present? I mean, there's men and women out here, yeah. But where are you at? Assembling. Peaceably assembling. So that we can consult for our common good. So that we can alter, reform, or abolish anything at any time we deem it necessary. That's the power of the people. Where are you? Let's go. Let's get reassembled. And I know that it's a lot of stress, especially in times like this. But I'm telling you right now, this shit's about to hit the fan, folks. And it's already been hitting the fan for several years. Most people just aren't awake to it. But it's there. It's happened. You know, some of the things that I want to put out there is the fact that, again, how does the DOJ try to stop Trump from doing executions if Trump wasn't already doing executions? I mean, that was on the news there. You know, talking about the DOJ trying to stop Trump. He already had done, what was it, 6 or 13? 13. Now, I think it was 6 executions. But, okay, logic and reason here. How do you stop a man from doing something if he's not already doing it? So, that means that Trump was already doing executions back in 2019. This is also the time period where Attorney General Barr came out and was talking in general about how that the executive branch was going to start exercising powers that properly belong to the executive branch, and they can just deal with it. And there isn't anything that the judicial branch can do about it. Imagine that. Because when it comes to the military side, judicial branch doesn't have any authority. That's the legislature that has that authority. The people. Yeah, well, you know, sinful toaster, I know how to read and comprehend what I read. I know how to see the writing on the walls. I don't watch mainstream media. I know about facts, about what has happened. That's the difference. Okay? It's not a Trump grift. Okay? But, like I've said before, people like you, many other people like you, and a whole bunch of other people are in for a serious rude awakening. This is a military operation. Make no mistake. It is happening. Executive Order 13818, taking down corruption, those involved in serious human rights abuse and corruption, worldwide. What do you think Israel's about? Think about that. What happened with Ukraine? That was the world hub. World hub over there, Ukraine being taken down. That was the, for human trafficking, men, women, and children for whatever purposes you can think of. Organ harvesting, adrenochrome, satanic rituals, arms deals, drug deals, those kinds of things. Why would Ukraine be under attack for that? Israel. home of the Jesuits, the bankers. What's going on over there? How come Trump moved the capital to Jerusalem? Yeah, Trump's a grifter. This is much bigger than Trump. Way bigger than Trump. In this instance, for the most part, Trump is the front man. Yeah, he's leading. I get it. But this is a military operation. It's not just one man. Okay? Trump is not just a one-man show. But for people like this man out here who doesn't want to face the truth, facts, and I've already put them out there. Those of you that have followed me for quite some time know this already. I've already put these facts out there, laid it out. Executive orders, proclamations, memorandums, law of war manual, the 2 federal directives for continuity of government. We're under a continuity of government. We're under martial law. Technically speaking, have been since 1863. So, that's right. And again, what part of all political power is inherent in the people do you not comprehend? So, again, it is supposed to be done by the people. Everybody else are public servants to take care of things that are external to the people. Federalist 45 supposedly in creating the federal government was for what? To declare war and to regulate foreign commerce. That's pretty much it. So, what's the big deal? Again, the problem is the Constitution is part of the common law as a fundamental law. You know, supreme law of the land, law of the land. You forgot the word common. It's common law of the land. Fundamentally, fundamental law. Now, this is why we have to comprehend that they changed the fundamental law from the common law, which includes the Constitution, to Roman civil law, the Code. United States Code, Code of Federal Regulations, Uniform Commercial Code, Idaho Code. Okay? They don't do constitutions under the Code. The Code is the law. Constitution goes with common law. Code is Roman civil law. 2 totally different jurisdictions. 2 different bodies of law. One has nothing to do with the other. They're 2 separate things. So, this is why many times we have been told, well, the Constitution doesn't apply here in this courtroom. It's because they're under Roman civil law, the Code. That's the law. Not the Constitution. Because that's common law. We're under Roman civil law. You can try to explain it any other way you want, but that's the truth. That's the facts. Roman civil law. Not admiralty jurisdiction, not maritime law, not all this other crap. Let's call it what it is. They altered the fundamental law from common law to Roman civil law. Period. That's the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God. Oh, that's a funny one, Mark. Who's going to file the first suit on an anchor baby Harris running for POTUS. I don't know if we're even going to get to there, but woo. Actually got some comments over here on Rumble. Adam and Eve covered up their nakedness with fig leaves, but God made them clothes to cover up their bodies. Right, because the tree of knowledge. They ate from the tree of knowledge. So then they knew they were naked. JG, that was from Rising Fawn. Thank you for that comment. JG54, in Black's Law Dictionary, 4th edition, isn't a democracy equated to an oligarchy, aristocracy, and monarchy? Well, you tell me if you're reading from Black's Law Dictionary, 4th edition. The answer is no. You have a democracy and you have an aristocracy under a republic. Monarchy, totally different thing. An oligarchy is not part of a form of government. Okay, we're talking about forms of government. More shit made up. Nowhere in there have I read anything about oligarchy. Nowhere in there have I read anything about constitutional republic. Yeah. And no worries if I've already covered it, the apology there. I get it. KJG, so how do we get back to the common law? We have to reassemble. We have to reassemble the people. That's the common law, government de jure. And once we take back our power, we have the right to alter, reform, or abolish anything at any time we deem it necessary. See, we make the Constitution. How many of you out there knew that? That the people in our Confederate Republic make the Constitution. Not only do they make the Constitution, they have to vote to pass it, to ratify as the instrument of government. And then, who does it apply to? Those that are bound by it. It doesn't apply to the people. That's the terms and conditions of the contract of employment. The Constitution itself. It creates the governor, the person. It creates the person, lieutenant governor. It creates the person, senator or representative. It creates the person, sheriff. Ah. Imagine that. So, it's up to us to do this. There's no such thing as a neo-fascist government. Again, show me facts of law that support the claim a neo-fascist government. What's the nature? What's the principles of a neo-fascist government? There's no such thing. It's just a bunch of shit made up. Until you folks learn the truth, real law, get the fuck out of here. Seriously, with your mumbo-jumbo bullshit. I'm tired of it. Everybody thinks they know what the hell they're talking about, and all you're doing is regurgitating some mainstream media bullshit. I'm so sick of this crap, dude. I put it on the screen and frickin' read from facts of law, of history of law. Did we see anything in there about a neo-fascist government? No. Monarchy. Republic. Aristocracy. Democracy. Huh. I don't hear anything about a neo-fascist. Come on, people. Learn. You're here. Maybe you're too busy making comments instead of paying attention and learning. Knowledge is power. If you do not have this knowledge, you have no power. And what this really means is when you have the knowledge, you know. Anything to the contrary is bullshit. Just like that right there. I'm calling it out. There's no such thing as a neo-fascist form of government. How about a despotic government? How about that one? Keep it simple. I don't know why it has to be so complicated. But I get some of these fancy, it's a neo whatever, all these fascists and communists and socialists and all that stuff. It's to make people sound like they're smart. But to people like me, who actually read, comprehend what they read, and then understand it, and gain this knowledge, when we come across people that talk like that, we know you're an idiot. We know that you don't know what the hell you're talking about. And that, my friends, is the difference. To know it is to say no to the difference. Oh, James, you're killing me. Beer and football, sore foot and beer belly. That's not assembly? Some assembly required, right? Yeah. So, again, National Assembly, national-assembly.net, folks. Thursday nights. Wednesday nights, Wednesday night workshop, private through Patreon, kirkslawcorner.com. Got the links in there. Go over there to Patreon if you want to get on Wednesday night. If you're looking for help, want one-on-one time with me, that's Tier 4 through Patreon. Other than that, God bless America. God bless the world. God bless mankind. And, well, hang in there, folks. One day at a time, right? Good to see you all here. Thanks for being here.